John Carson, a name reminiscent of a dramatic American late-night comedy talk show, has won 6 Primetime Emmy Awards, a Governor's Award, and a Peabody Award. Famous for bringing laughter to audiences, John Carson was also known for an unpleasant personality that made many of his guests extremely uncomfortable. Not only that, his family relationships are also a testament to an obnoxious John Carson. This video will give you details about John Carson's conflicts with his guests, revealing his completely opposite personality to the public. Johnny Carson's tenure as the host of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson from 1962 to 1992 marked an iconic era in late-night television. Carson's affable charm and comedic prowess made his show a platform that not only showcased established stars, but also catapulted many emerging comedians into mainstream success. The Tonight Show became a launching pad for numerous comedians, providing them with a coveted platform to gain widespread recognition. Notable figures like Jerry Seinfeld and Joan Rivers found their initial breakthroughs thanks to their performances on Carson's stage. The show's format, with its mix of humor, interviews, and skits, allowed these comedians to captivate audiences and establish themselves in the entertainment industry. In addition to propelling emerging talent, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson regularly featured A-list celebrities, further solidifying Carson's status as a television icon. Guests like Frank Sinatra and Bob Hope graced the stage, contributing to the show's allure and cultural significance. Despite Carson's immense success and influence, he found himself in the shadow of another legendary comedian, Bob Hope, who was regarded as one of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century. Bob Hope's stature at NBC was such that he occupied the very stage Johnny used for his nightly show. According to legend, Hope could essentially secure a spot on The Tonight Show whenever he pleased, often requesting appearances when he had a new special or project to promote. While Johnny Carson was undoubtedly one of the most bankable stars for NBC, there existed a sense that he never quite surpassed the towering presence of Bob Hope within the network. It was rumored that Carson, despite accommodating Hope's requests for appearances, did not particularly relish having him on the show. The dynamics between the two comedy giants, one the established king of late night and the other an enduring legend, added a layer of complexity to the behind-the-scenes world of The Tonight Show. Right. The seemingly amicable on-screen relationship between Johnny Carson and Bob Hope on The Tonight Show concealed a deep-seated animosity that over the years evolved into a strong dislike on Carson's part. Contrary to the affable banter and camaraderie presented to the audience, behind the scenes, Carson harbored a growing disdain for the legendary comedian. One of the primary reasons for Johnny Carson's aversion to Bob Hope stemmed from Hope's perceived inability to engage in improvisation, a skill Carson highly valued. Carson, renowned for his quick wit and spontaneous banter, found Hope lacking in the ability to engage in unscripted exchanges. Despite Hope's legendary status as a comedian, it became apparent to Carson that Hope heavily relied on comedy writers even during his physical prime. As the years passed, Hope's dependence on writers increased, reaching a point where he struggled to comprehend the unfolding events around him without scripted assistance. This stark contrast to Carson's dynamic and improvisational style left the late-night host increasingly frustrated with Hope's appearances on the show. Johnny Carson's frustration with Bob Hope reached its zenith by the time Carson concluded his illustrious tenure on The Tonight Show in 1992. The legendary comedian had become, in Carson's eyes, one of the worst guests he had to endure over the years. Despite Carson's preference for spontaneous and lively interactions with guests, he felt compelled to continue featuring Hope due to the latter's stature at NBC. The dynamic between the two comedians, often presented as a harmonious collaboration for the audience, was, in reality, a testament to the complexities of the entertainment industry. Carson, unable or unwilling to turn down Hope's requests to appear on the show, endured what he perceived as the staleness of Hope's scripted routines. The power dynamics at NBC, with Hope holding a privileged position, limited Carson's ability to refuse the legendary comedian's frequent requests. The seemingly spontaneous appearances of Bob Hope on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson were, according to Carson, meticulously staged performances that left the late-night host increasingly frustrated. Despite the appearance of spontaneity, Carson asserted that there was nothing genuinely impromptu about Hope's contributions to the show. The carefully orchestrated appearances often followed a predictable pattern, with Hope delivering a set of scripted jokes and seamlessly transitioning to promotional material for his upcoming specials. During these appearances, Bob Hope's purported surprises were anything but, as he would effortlessly slip into a routine that included scripted humor and promotional segments. Johnny Carson, a champion of spontaneous banter and quick wit, found Hope's lack of genuine spontaneity irksome, contributing to the growing tension between the two. One particular source of Carson's displeasure was the inclusion of reels of footage from Bob Hope's forthcoming specials. Carson alleged that these promotional segments were poorly edited and significantly longer than the time Hope had promised. If Bob indicated he needed only 2 minutes, the footage would often extend to a taxing 5 minutes. This discrepancy, coupled with Hope's perceived forwardness and disregard for the agreed-upon time, became a significant point of contention for Johnny Carson. In one instance, Bob Hope went a step further. While appearing on The Tonight Show, he noticed the audience's exceptionally loud laughter during Carson's monologue. Seizing the opportunity, Hope approached Johnny with a bold request to use recordings of the audience's laughter as part of his upcoming special. In a moment that showcased Hope's audacity, Johnny agreed to the unusual request, but was once again taken aback by the comedian's directness. Bob Hope's appearances transitioned from merely irritating to significantly challenging for the host, especially as the legendary comedian's health began to decline. Johnny Carson, who valued spontaneity and improvisation, found Hope's difficulties in adapting to unscripted moments particularly vexing. As Hope's ability to improvise dwindled, Carson witnessed a stark contrast to the dynamic banter they had once shared. According to Johnny Carson, Bob Hope struggled to grasp the context of conversations and often became disoriented unless the dialogue adhered strictly to a script. In moments of improvisation, Hope's responses could be unpredictable, sometimes answering a different question than the one posed by Carson. This shift in Hope's capabilities became a significant source of frustration for Carson, highlighting the challenges of maintaining the dynamic and lively atmosphere that characterized The Tonight Show. As Bob Hope's health deteriorated, Johnny Carson's irritation with the legendary comedian intensified. Carson observed a decline in Hope's ability to engage in the unscripted banter that had once defined their on-screen interactions. Witnessing Bob Hope in this state contributed to Johnny's decision to retire before his own health became a limiting factor. Legend has it that after one of Hope's later performances, Carson turned to his crew and jokingly suggested they shoot him if he ever reached a similar state of diminished capability. Bob Hope's frequent guest appearances on The Tonight Show were emblematic of a bygone era in late-night television, but they also underscored the challenges of aging in the entertainment industry. The difficulties Carson experienced with Hope served as a poignant reminder of the inevitable passage of time and its impact on the dynamic between hosts and their guests. In addition to Bob Hope, another frequent guest who left a lasting impact, albeit in a different way, on Johnny Carson was Joan Rivers. The two comedians, who had once shared a successful on-screen chemistry that resonated with audiences, developed a notable feud over the years. Despite Joan Rivers getting her big break on the show and enjoying early success with Carson as the host, their relationship soured, adding a layer of complexity to Carson's interactions with his frequent guests. Carson's memorable comment after her initial appearance, expressing his belief that she was going to become a star, proved prescient. Rivers did indeed rise to stardom and continued to grace Carson's show for many years. Despite Rivers' frequent appearances on The Tonight Show and the apparent success of their on-screen interactions, behind the scenes, the relationship between Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers was not as warm as one might assume. While Rivers became a reliable stand-in whenever Carson was unavailable due to vacations or illness, the friendship that the public might have perceived was, according to accounts, largely a facade for the cameras. Contrary to the image of camaraderie they projected on television, Carson and Rivers did not develop a genuine friendship off-screen. Instead, Johnny treated Joan Rivers more as a business asset than a personal confidant. The disparity between their on-screen chemistry and the lack of a true friendship became increasingly evident as the years went by. In the 1980s, when Joan Rivers was given the opportunity to host her own late-night talk show, tensions between her and Johnny Carson escalated. Carson, who had become a powerful figure in the television industry, took exception to Rivers pursuing her own show without consulting him. The situation led to what can be described as a public feud between the two prominent figures in the entertainment industry. According to Joan Rivers, Carson's anger at her securing a hosting position on a competing show was rooted in gender bias. She contended that Carson, a powerful figure in the industry, was not ready to accept a woman as a late-night talk show host, and his actions were a manifestation of that resistance. In response to Joan's career move, Johnny Carson wielded his influence by publicly declaring that any guest appearing on her show would be barred from appearing on The Tonight Show. This strategic move dealt a severe blow to Joan's show, leading to its early demise. Despite the setback, Joan Rivers persevered and found success as a daytime talk show host, carving out a space for herself in the television landscape. The gendered nature of the feud, as asserted by Joan Rivers, sheds light on the challenges faced by women in late-night television. The competitive and often cutthroat nature of the industry, coupled with prevailing gender biases, made it exceptionally difficult for women to break through and assert themselves as hosts of major late-night programs. The aftermath of the feud continued to impact Joan Rivers' career. She never returned to hosting late-night television, unable to secure a spot on The Tonight Show until shortly before her death, when Jimmy Fallon had taken over as host. Jay Leno, Carson's chosen successor, had refused to have Joan on during his tenure out of respect for Johnny, maintaining the restrictions put in place by his predecessor. Despite the common Hollywood practice of reconciling feuds as individuals approach the end of their lives, this was not the case for Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers. Johnny's passing did not lead to a resolution, and the two never had the opportunity to patch things up. In Joan's remaining years, she continued to express her grievances, insisting that Carson, who had once been her professional mentor, had acted unprofessionally in initiating the feud. Joan maintained her stance, revealing that she had lost respect for Carson entirely by the time of his death. Johnny Carson's outspoken opinions extended beyond individual guests on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, to include figures within the entertainment industry and even colleagues at NBC, such as Tom Snyder, the host of The Tomorrow Show. Carson's candid and sometimes abrasive assessments of his peers, including Snyder, revealed a side of the legendary late-night host that wasn't always diplomatic. Carson's primary criticism of Tom Snyder centered around what he perceived as Snyder's lackluster and uninteresting hosting style. In Carson's eyes, Snyder was not only boring but also lacked any discernible talent. These sentiments were not confined to private conversations. Carson's opinions about Snyder occasionally spilled into public spaces. One notable incident occurred in a Los Angeles bar in the late 1970s, where Carson, fueled by a few glasses of wine, unleashed a rant about Tom Snyder. The candid and critical remarks, made in a social setting, underscored Carson's unfiltered and sometimes brash communication style. Criticizing a colleague publicly, especially in a social setting, is generally considered unprofessional and can strain working relationships. Carson's opinion about Snyder's talents and entertainment value added a layer of tension to their professional relationship. The late-night landscape is known for its competition and rivalry, and Carson's open disapproval of Snyder's abilities brought an added element of friction to their roles at NBC. Johnny Carson's reputation for giving the cold shoulder during his reign as the king of late-night television was indeed a well-known aspect of his personality. Carson's approach to hosting The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson included a deliberate avoidance of his guests both on and off the set. Unlike some hosts who engaged in friendly banter with their guests before or after interviews, Carson maintained a more reserved and detached demeanor. Orson Welles, a notable guest on the show, provided insight into Carson's distinctive style. According to Welles, the show's crew marveled at Carson's ability to pre-record conversations with guests, including actors. Carson's reserved nature extended beyond the live broadcast, and he preferred to keep interactions minimal, even in the more casual settings of pre-recorded segments. This precision and distance were evident not only in Carson's off-screen interactions but also during the show itself. Carson didn't feign amusement or enthusiasm if he found a particular segment or guest less engaging. The authenticity and transparency in his reactions, or lack thereof, set Carson apart in the world of late-night hosts. One characteristic of Carson's hosting style was his willingness to end an interview early if he felt it wasn't captivating or entertaining. This approach, while maintaining a level of professionalism, showcased Carson's commitment to delivering a show that he believed met the standards of both himself and his audience. However, Don Rickles, unlike Bob Hope and Joan Rivers, managed to remain a beloved and welcomed guest throughout Johnny Carson's tenure on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Rickles, a legendary comedian renowned for his sharp and often self-deprecating humor, not only made frequent appearances on the show, but also enjoyed a genuinely warm reception from the host. In stark contrast to the lack of authentic chemistry Carson experienced with Bob Hope, Johnny had no such issues with Don Rickles. The dynamic between Carson and Rickles was characterized by a genuine camaraderie and mutual appreciation for each other's comedic talents. Rickles' visits were met with enthusiasm, and Johnny Carson not only found him authentically funny, but also relished the opportunity to engage in improvisational banter with the quick-witted comedian. The on-screen rapport between Johnny Carson and Don Rickles became a hallmark of The Tonight Show. Rickles, known for his fearless and often ribald humor, brought a unique energy to the set, and Carson, appreciative of Rickles' comedic prowess, seamlessly navigated the unscripted moments that unfolded during their interactions. While the public might have assumed that frequent guest appearances signaled genuine friendships, the disparity between Carson's relationships with Bob Hope and Don Rickles offers a revealing glimpse into the nuanced dynamics of late-night television. Carson's warmth and affinity for Rickles showcased that, despite the challenges he faced with certain guests, there were comedians with whom he shared a true and lasting camaraderie. In addition to conflicts with his guests, Johnny Carson was also known to be a terrible husband, father, and son. This is the proof. Johnny Carson's honeymoon with his fourth wife, Alexis Maas, in 1987 took an unexpected turn when the renowned talk show host found himself in a sour mood. The honeymoon, typically a blissful time for couples to bask in the joy of their newlywed status, became a testing ground for Carson's notorious temperament. The couple embarked on a yacht trip in the picturesque landscapes of Italy, a setting that one would assume to be the perfect backdrop for romance. However, the idyllic scene was shattered by an exchange that would later be recounted as a moment of marital tension. It was during this luxurious getaway that Carson, known for his sometimes crabby and occasionally cruel demeanor, directed a particularly biting comment at his new wife. The incident unfolded when Carson, apparently upset by a comment made by Maas, couldn't contain his frustration. In a moment that must have cast a shadow over the honeymoon bliss, he sternly remarked to Moss, "We've been married for 3 weeks. If you say something like that again, this marriage won't last another 3 weeks." The weight of Carson's words hung in the air, leaving an uncomfortable atmosphere on what was supposed to be a time of celebration. The remark hinted at a deeper undercurrent of tension, raising questions about the dynamics of Carson's relationships and his ability to navigate the challenges of marriage. The public's fascination with celebrity marriages often extends beyond the glitz and glamour, delving into the intricacies of their personal lives. In this instance, Carson's reputation for acerbic wit found its way into his private moments, offering a glimpse into a side of the iconic figure that was not always on display during his illustrious career. Johnny Carson's second marriage to Joanne Copeland, which began in 1963, unfolded with a complexity that surpassed the expectations of a blissful union. Their meeting in 1960, when Joanne was a flight attendant and Johnny was hosting the game show Who Do You Trust, marked the beginning of a relationship that would eventually be marked by turbulence. The marriage weathered until 1972, but during that time, both Johnny and Joanne engaged in extramarital affairs, with Joanne having a notable liaison with football player Frank Gifford. The details of these affairs were not widely known at the time, and despite the challenges in their relationship, the couple's split in 1972 was relatively amicable. Remarkably, Joanne remained supportive of Johnny's television career even after the divorce, a testament to the complex dynamics at play in their relationship. The revelation of Joanne Copeland's affair with Frank Gifford came to light in 2013 when Carson's former lawyer, Henry Bushkin, penned a book that delved into the intimate and often sordid details of Johnny Carson's life. Bushkin made several controversial claims, including that Johnny had asked him to photograph Joanne with Frank to gather evidence of the affair. The book also alleged that Johnny was in possession of a revolver during this tumultuous period, leaving questions unanswered about why he had such a weapon. According to Bushkin, Johnny was devastated by the revelation of Joanne's infidelity, shedding tears over the betrayal. The emotional toll of the incident reportedly led Carson to embark on a drinking binge with his Tonight Show co-host, Ed McMahon, underscoring the profound impact the affair had on him personally. The aftermath of the affair continued to reverberate in later years. In a twist of fate, Frank Gifford, the man involved in the affair with Joanne, later married Kathy Lee Gifford. When Kathy Lee questioned Frank about the affair, he claimed he couldn't remember, a statement that she accepted given Frank's diagnosis of a brain disease around the same time. Frank Gifford passed away in 2015, closing a chapter on the tangled web of relationships that characterized this period of Johnny Carson's life. Besides, the complex relationship between Johnny Carson and his mother, Ruth, adds a layer of intricacy to the persona of the iconic television host. Carson's candid and, at times, harsh remarks about his mother shed light on a strained dynamic that he believed significantly influenced his own personality and contributed to the failure of his marriages. The blunt statement, "The Wicked Witch is Dead," attributed to Johnny Carson upon his mother's passing, reflects a depth of bitterness and resentment. Carson's refusal to attend Ruth's funeral and his characterization of her as the toughest son of an expletive suggests a troubled history between mother and son. Carson openly laid blame on his mother for many of his negative personality traits and, notably, for the dissolution of his marriages. In a revealing moment, Carson didn't mince words when he directly pointed the finger at his mother for the failures in his romantic relationships, declaring, "My marriages failed because she expletive me up." This bold assertion implies a belief that the issues he faced in his personal life were rooted in the influence of his mother, painting a picture of a tumultuous maternal relationship that left lasting scars. Carson's reputation for being rude and condescending, traits he openly acknowledged in himself, became in his eyes a direct result of the influence exerted by his mother. The harsh language he used to describe her raises questions about the nature of their interactions and the impact it had on his emotional well-being. While Carson was undeniably a master of comedy and charm on screen, his off-screen struggles and interpersonal challenges provide a more complex narrative. The dynamics with his mother, as expressed by Carson himself, offer a glimpse into the personal struggles that shaped the man behind the television persona. The refusal to attend his mother's funeral and the acerbic comments reveal a depth of pain and resentment that goes beyond the public's perception of the affable late-night host. The complex and strained personal relationships in Johnny Carson's life extended beyond his marriages and into his family, particularly with his son, Rick Carson, from his first marriage. Amid the fame and success of the renowned late-night host, the struggles within his family, often kept private, unfolded in a narrative marked by mental illness, estrangement, and tragedy. Rick Carson, Johnny's son from his first marriage, grappled with mental illness during a time when such matters were typically hushed. The stigmatization of mental health issues compounded the challenges faced by Rick, who eventually found himself in a mental hospital. The secrecy surrounding mental health in those years likely intensified the difficulties faced by both Rick and Johnny, contributing to the strained father-son relationship. The estrangement between Johnny and Rick persisted until a tragic incident in June of 1991. Rick's vehicle veered off a cliff near Morro Bay, California, resulting in a fatal 125-foot plunge. The untimely death prompted Johnny Carson to break his silence about his son on his show, shedding light on the troubled relationship that had largely been concealed from the public eye. The father-son dynamic had already been marred by incidents that showcased the challenges they faced. Both Johnny and Rick were known to struggle with alcohol, exacerbating their tumultuous relationship. One notable episode occurred during NBC's 25th anniversary party for Johnny Carson aboard the Queen Mary. Rick, under the influence, found himself on the receiving end of Johnny's wrath. Eyewitness accounts describe a heated confrontation where Johnny, visibly angered, became aggressive towards his son. Witnesses reported that Johnny even made a motion as if to strike Rick, stopped only by the intervention of someone present. The incident on the Queen Mary stands as a public manifestation of the deep-seated issues within the Carson family, revealing a volatile side to Johnny that contrasted sharply with his on-screen charm. What do you think about Johnny Carson's conflicts with guests and family, which revealed his unpleasant personality? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.